The desert stretched wide, endless under the fading orange of the evening sky. Dust clung to every surface, settling on wagon wheels, leather boots, and the fabric of clothes worn thin by the road. It was the kind of land where secrets got buried in shallow graves and justice was measured in bullets. Rebecca's hand trembled slightly as she held the revolver out, the polished steel glinting under the dying light of the sun. Her grip was firm, but her heart was a storm inside her chest. Across from her, the man in the wide-brimmed hat stood motionless, his rough features shadowed, unreadable. His eyes, though, never left hers, steady, piercing, the kind that could cut through a person's soul. "Don't make me do this, Elias," she said, her voice low but unshaking. "You know I'll pull the trigger." Elias leaned his weight slightly to one side, his hand hovering near his holster, though he hadn't reached for his own gun. His tone was calm, almost too calm. "You ain't the killin' kind, Rebecca. You never were." Her finger tightened on the trigger. He had no right to use her name like that, soft, almost tender. Not after what he'd done. Not after the bodies left behind, the betrayal carved into her life like a scar. Behind them, the wagons stood silent, their wooden frames groaning in the dry wind. The campfire embers still smoldered, forgotten when the shouting began. The prairie stretched beyond, and somewhere, a coyote howled, lonely, hungry, like the desert itself was listening in on their standoff. "You killed them," she hissed. "All of them, my brother, my father, every last soul in that caravan. And now you're standing there like none of it matters." Elias's jaw tightened. His silence was answer enough. The truth had clawed its way out over weeks of tracking him. Whispers in saloons, notes scrawled in blood, testimonies from dying men. It all led to him, Elias Granger, once her protector, now her greatest enemy. But what burned deepest was not just the murders. It was the betrayal. Years ago, when the frontier was harsher than any law could tame, Elias had taken her under his wing. He taught her to shoot, to ride, to survive. He had been her anchor in a world where women were often treated like currency. And she had trusted him with everything. Now, staring down the barrel at him, she wondered how much of that had been lies. Elias finally spoke, his voice gravel scraping the silence. "Things ain't always how they seem, Rebecca. You think you know what happened, but you don't. I didn't kill your kin. Don't lie to me," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. "I ain't lyin'." His gaze flicked past her shoulder, to the horizon where the shadows grew longer. "There are worse devils ridin' these lands than me. Devils that'll gut you in your sleep and make you believe it was your own hand that did it." She faltered, just slightly. His words were like poison, half-truths meant to worm their way into her doubt. She couldn't let them. "I buried their bodies," she whispered, her throat tightening. "I saw the bullet holes. Every one of them, and I know your damn gun leaves the same mark." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Maybe so, but the one who pulled the trigger that night wasn't me. You want the truth, Rebecca? You'll have to lower that gun and listen." Her pulse hammered in her ears. The rage that had carried her this far wavered against something else, fear, maybe, or the fragile memory of who Elias once was to her. But then, clear as day, she remembered her brother's lifeless eyes staring at nothing. The decision solidified in her chest. "You'll tell me the truth in hell," she said coldly. Her finger pressed down, but before the gun could roar, a sharp sound split the air, the snap of wood, the hiss of an arrow slicing past her ear. It embedded into the wagon wheel behind her with a deep thunk. She froze, spinning her head just enough to see the shadowy figures rising on the ridge beyond. At least half a dozen of them, mounted, silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. Their whoops carried on the wind, tribal war cries, raw and chilling. Elias cursed under his breath. His hand went to his holster at last. "They've found us." Rebecca's grip wavered. She had been so focused on Elias, she hadn't even noticed the approach. The riders descended, fast and merciless, kicking up dust as they charged. Guns flashed in the dying light, and another arrow zipped past, grazing her arm. The sting of it jolted her back into reality. "Rebecca," Elias barked, his revolver already spitting fire as he dropped one of the attackers clean off his horse. "You can hate me all you like, but if you want to live, you'll fight with me now." Her heart screamed in protest. Every instinct told her to put a bullet in him first and let the desert take her after. But survival had a voice louder than vengeance. She pivoted, firing at the riders, the kick of the gun rattling up her arm. One went down, another veered his horse away. The camp exploded into chaos. Horses whinnied, wagons splintered as bullets thudded into them, and the air filled with the acrid bite of gunpowder. Elias fought like a man possessed, every shot precise, every movement deadly. Rebecca fought beside him, her mind torn between rage and necessity. By the time the dust began to settle, 5 bodies lay sprawled in the dirt, their blood soaking into the thirsty ground. The remaining riders retreated into the distance, their cries fading with the night. Breathing hard, Rebecca lowered her smoking gun. Her hands trembled, not just from the battle, but from the closeness of Elias beside her. He holstered his weapon, wiping sweat and blood from his brow. "You're welcome," he muttered darkly. She turned to him, fury flaring again. "This changes nothing. You're still a murderer. And when I'm sure those are the last of them, I'll finish what I started." Elias looked at her, his eyes tired but sharp. "Then you best keep that gun close, darlin'. Because until you know the truth, you don't know who the real enemy is." The night swallowed them soon after, the fire rebuilt, the silence heavy. Rebecca sat with the revolver in her lap, watching Elias across the flames. He had saved her life, yes. But that didn't erase the blood on his hands. Still, in the darkness, a question gnawed at her. What if he was telling the truth? What if the devil that had slaughtered her family was still out there, watching, waiting? And if so, what did that mean for her vengeance? The desert night gave no answers. Only shadows, and the faint howl of coyotes in the distance. The desert night was colder than Rebecca remembered. The fire crackled, throwing long, jagged shadows across the ground. Elias sat opposite her, his hat tilted low, face half hidden in the flickering light. His revolver rested within reach, but his hands were busy, cleaning, reloading, every movement steady and practiced. Rebecca hadn't put her weapon down since the fight. It lay in her lap, the barrel still warm, her finger brushing the trigger now and then like a reminder of the promise she had made herself. Elias would pay. Sooner or later, she would put him in the dirt. But the silence between them wasn't easy. It wasn't the kind that brought peace, it was the kind that tightened the chest, the kind filled with things left unsaid. "Why'd they come for us?" she finally asked, her voice breaking the brittle quiet. Elias looked up slowly, his eyes meeting hers in the orange glow. "Because someone wanted you dead. Someone who don't like the trail you've been following." Her jaw tightened. "You mean the trail that led to you?" He smirked, but there was no humor in it. "You think mighty highly of yourself if you reckon I'm the end of your road." Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You said there were worse devils out here. Then tell me who. Tell me what you know." For the first time, Elias hesitated. His hand stilled over his revolver, and he stared into the flames as though the answer might crawl out of the fire itself. "There's a man," he said finally. "Goes by the name Calder Holt. He's the kind who don't just kill for gold. He kills because it pleases him. Because he likes watchin' the light go out in a person's eyes. He's got a band of men at his back, men who'll slit a throat for a scrap of jerky if he asks 'em to. They were the ones that raided your people that night." Rebecca's chest burned, her hand clenched tighter around her revolver. "You're lying." "No," Elias said, voice low and deadly serious. "I was there. I saw what they did." Her breath caught. "You, what?" "I tried to stop it," he muttered, eyes darkening. "But there were too many of 'em. I killed 2 before they burned the wagons. I thought you were dead, Rebecca. I thought they left you in the fire with the rest. When I found out you survived, I didn't know whether to be grateful or damned." His words hit like a punch to the chest. She wanted to scream at him, call him a liar, accuse him of spinning stories to save his skin. But his eyes, tired, haunted, told a different tale. "You expect me to believe you?" she said bitterly. "No," Elias said, leaning back. "I expect you to stay alive long enough to see for yourself. Calder won't let you go now. You're a loose end, and he don't leave loose ends." Rebecca swallowed hard, her throat dry as sand. Part of her wanted to lower her gun, to let the weight of her anger slip for just a moment. But then she saw again the faces of her family, lifeless, broken, gone. "You should have told me sooner," she whispered. "You wouldn't have listened," he replied. The fire burned low, and silence fell again. The next morning came harsh and blinding. The sun rose with no mercy, painting the desert in gold and white. Rebecca mounted her horse, keeping Elias always in her sight. They rode in silence across the plains, wagon wheels creaking behind them as they pushed forward. It wasn't long before they found the first sign. A body. It lay face down in the dust, an arrow through the spine. The vultures had already started their work. Elias dismounted, crouching beside it, scanning the ground. Not Holt's men, he muttered. Too messy. Rebecca frowned. Then who? Elias stood, his jaw set. Scouts. Means Holt knows where we are. The weight of his words sank in. They weren't just being hunted, they were being toyed with. That night, Rebecca dreamed of fire. She saw her brother screaming, her father's hands reaching for her through smoke, the crack of gunfire tearing it all away. She woke with her hand on her revolver, her heart pounding, sweat soaking her shirt. And Elias was gone. Panic shot through her. She leapt to her feet, spinning, searching. The fire was cold, the desert silent. Her first thought was betrayal. He'd left her, slipped into the night like a thief. But then she heard it. The sound of voices, low, guttural, carried on the wind. She crept forward, crouching behind a boulder. There, in the moonlight, she saw Elias. He was on his knees, hands tied behind his back, surrounded by 5 men. Their leader stood tall, a wide grin cutting across his scarred face. His eyes gleamed with cruelty. Calder Holt. Rebecca's heart clenched. She had seen that face before, in nightmares, in the memories she tried to bury. He was the devil who had destroyed her family. You thought you could keep her from me, Granger. Holt sneered, kicking Elias in the chest. Elias grunted, falling into the dirt. You think I don't know where the girl is? I can smell vengeance like blood in the water. She'll come. Rebecca's grip tightened on her revolver. Every fiber of her being screamed to charge in, to put a bullet between Holt's eyes. But 5 men against her. It would be suicide, so she waited, trembling, watching as Holt's men dragged Elias to his feet. You'll tell me where she is, Holt said, pressing a knife under Elias's chin. Or I'll gut you here and now. Elias spat blood in his face. Go to hell, Holt laughed, wiping his cheek with the back of his hand. Oh, I'll take my time. And when I find her, I'll carve her the way I carved her kin. Rebecca's breath caught. Rage boiled in her chest, hotter than the desert sun. This was the monster. This was the face of her family's murderer. She couldn't wait any longer. With a sharp inhale, she raised her revolver, steadied her hand, and fired. The bullet struck true, hitting one of Holt's men square in the back. He fell with a scream, and chaos erupted. Holt spun, snarling, as the others drew their weapons. Elias twisted, using the distraction to slam his shoulder into the man holding him. Rebecca kept firing, each shot loud in the still night. Another man dropped, then another. Elias broke free, grabbing the fallen man's revolver and turning it on Holt's men. When the dust settled, 3 bodies lay lifeless in the sand. Holt was gone, vanished into the night like smoke. Rebecca stood panting, her revolver smoking in her hand. Elias staggered to her side, blood dripping from a cut on his temple. You saved me, he said, almost surprised. She looked at him, her chest heaving. Don't mistake this for forgiveness. I didn't save you, I saved my chance to kill Holt myself. Elias smirked, despite the blood. Fair enough. They stood in silence, the night heavy with death. Rebecca stared into the darkness where Holt had fled, her rage burning hotter than ever. She had seen him now. The devil who took everything from her was flesh and blood, and still out there. And she would not stop until she buried him. As dawn broke, she holstered her revolver and mounted her horse once more. Elias climbed onto his own, wincing at his wounds. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The hunt was on, and the desert, merciless and wide, would decide which of them lived to see the end.